Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Literacy View. Happy New Year. So, we are doing a very special episode. We are going back to our top 5 episodes of 2024. But before we do, we have some important announcements. As you know, Judy and I are going to the World Literacy Summit in Oxford in April. And we just found out that we are presenting at Research Ed in New York City in March. So lots of exciting things coming up. And as some of you know, our topic is about podcasting as professional development and edutaining educators. And one of the ways that Judy and I are going to edutain you is we are going to have a very special event at the end of January, January 30th. So save the date. And we are going to have a trivia game based on these 5 episodes that we're going to be talking about. So you'll have plenty of time to go back, listen again, and this time, listen again where you're actively listening because you're going to be quizzed on it. And as we know, quizzing is a great way to learn material, and that is part of our plan for you. So let's get on with it. I want to introduce you, if you don't know, to my beautiful co-host, Judy Boxner. I am Faith Borkowski. If you're just joining us, welcome. So we're going to talk about our top 5 episodes of 2024, and we're starting with episode 57. What should people
Faith, if I could just chime in, and we're going to be doing this episode, even though we're releasing it on Friday, which is tomorrow, we are doing it in the format of Takeaway Tuesday. So it's going to, Faith, can you explain what the Takeaway Tuesday format is?
So what Judy and I started to do was take the long form content and condense it into short form content so that those people who just want to have the takeaways from those episodes, from our perspective, are able to tune in, and hopefully you'll come up with your own Takeaway Tuesdays as well. But because of the holiday, it is now Takeaway Friday.
Yep. And I just want to say one more thing. I think this is one of the most important pieces of our whole podcast, because the main thing that we want to happen is we want the application piece to stick. We want to move professional development away from one and done. I heard it today. I got a PowerPoint presentation, and then it goes in a filing cabinet, and then you don't use it. We want to make sure that what we're talking about and what we're learning sticks. So let's jump on it, Faith.
All right, to start, episode 57. What should PA instruction look like? So, this episode was with Tiffany Peltier and Marianne Rice. Judy, what was your top takeaway for a teacher?
So, my top takeaway for a teacher, I'm going to read a little excerpt from the episode. And so, if we waited another 10 years and had a lot more studies, that number might shift a bit. So, don't get too attached to the 10. Get attached to the idea that there is a bit of a diminishing return, and PA instruction doesn't need to go on forever. So, the research is saying, teachers, that phonemic awareness, all the research is saying that it should be connected to letters. And the amount of time that we spend on it needs to be very intentional. It's not something that you need to do forever, because some kids have already cracked the code and they know how to read. And is that the best use of your time? Absolutely not. So let's make sure that the time we're using is being used wisely.
And mine was, of course, very similar. Spend time on using letters and spend time on blending and segmenting. So if phonics is done well, phonemic awareness is a byproduct of really good phonics teaching. Next one, principle, takeaway, go.
Use your time wisely principles. You have a lot of control in that building. And Faith is looking at me. We've had a lot of jinx moments when we text each other and it feels like we're having another one. We do not pre-plan this. We do this on our own. But principles, use your time wisely as you develop your literacy blocks. And also phonemic awareness. It doesn't have to only be done in the classroom. It could be done in the hallways, during transitions, during brain breaks. So please use your time wisely. And second graders in the middle of the year, if most of the class already cracked the code, there's better use of your time. So be intentional with your literacy block design.
And I had in big letters principles. Don't waste time with I mean it, Judy. I mean it. Don't waste time with programs that only focus on phonemic awareness in the dark. I'm not going to say the name of the program, but for your tier 1, especially, and then your intervention kids could also jump right into doing really good phonics work rather than wasting time on doing something that can have diminishing returns if you spend way too much time in this area. Next one, parents. What would you tell parents about this?
For parents, there was a excerpt that said, yeah, I'll jump in, and Marianne Rice was on that episode too. You can add to it, but all I would say is we don't know that there's not enough research on that assessment. That is referring to the past assessment. So a lot of you guys will be getting like reports about your kids and how they're doing. And the truth is that, the past does not, according to the research and the ladies that spoke, does not have that much research on it. So there's actually components on that assessment, I don't know if it's been updated, that are actually asking kids to do advanced phonemic awareness skills that, according to the research, weren't the most important in teaching kids how to read. So make sure that your kids are getting screened with screeners that actually have research and evidence behind them. And ask questions, parents. That's it.
So, my takeaway for parents would be, if you're doing work with your child at home, reinforce blending and segmenting, pushing sounds together to build a word, taking a word and breaking it up into sounds for spelling. And, it's not your job to teach your own children, parents, but if there is a way of asking for what you can do to reinforce what they're learning in their phonics lessons, those two skills of blending and segmenting would be the way to go. Next one, the research nugget, Judy.
So it looked like the research, if I understood it correctly, showed that if you spend too much time on phonemic awareness, you're going to have diminishing returns. That caught my attention.
Same one. Same one.
Wow.
Okay, yes.
That's pretty cool.
Yes.
And
I
Faith
think
and I, as we're doing this task, we've realized that we're really working on, identifying key details. We're reading our own transcripts. We're taking notes. We're summarizing. So, as I said, the research is showing diminishing returns if you spend too much time on it. That caught my attention. And it was something that was really evident, but also increasingly more returns after 16 hours for phonemic awareness, PA with letters. So make sure that if you want to see good results when you are doing your phonemic awareness instruction, connect it with letters. Don't do phonemic awareness in the dark. Kids have to hear the sounds, they have to see the letters, and like Faith said, they have to know that you can blend, you could segment, and so forth.
Last one, student outcomes.
Wait, Faith, did you do your research nugget?
It was exactly the same as yours. Exactly.
Talk about it for a second.
I don't have to. I had exactly the same thing. So let's zip along.
So it's a jinx again, huh, Faith? So what am I doing now?
Student outcomes. So what's the nugget that we want to impart?
Okay, so student outcomes will increase if we provide students with what they need, and we need to be intentional with the management of our time. So don't waste students' time. Give them what they need, and they will thrive.
So I think the way to increase student outcomes in this particular area and what I got out of the research would be focus on the nonsense word fluency assessment, whatever it might be called for you. So if you're looking at a universal screener, that's going to tell you if kids are able to blend and segment and then go back and see if maybe there's a way of focusing kids on those particular phonemic awareness activities that maybe you could spend a little bit of time on. But the real key here is getting into letters and sounds, blending and segmenting. That's what I took away from this. And that would be the assessment that I think has the most value here. So let's move on to our next episode, episode 61. And that is conflating leveled books with predictable texts and thinking about decodables with Tiffany Peltier again. So yay, Tiffany, and Wiley Blevins. So what would you say, Judy, as a teacher takeaway?
This is amazing. Faith, that term edutainment, it feels like I'm on a game show. I feel like I'm on Double Jeopardy right now. This is no joke. Faith is holding me accountable. So, Faith, what did you just say? Who am I speaking about?
We're up to the teacher takeaway for episode 61. And that was the one about conflating leveled books with predictable text and then thinking about decodables.
All right, so this was a quote from the episode. Now, here's the thing is we need students to be in text and reading text because we know time on text matters. Application is so important. Kids do not learn how to read through the power of osmosis. They need to be shown how to read. I would not give a text that's patterned to a student. So stay away from those pattern texts because they're not using decoding skills when they're seeing, I love mom, I love dad, I love hamburgers. That's ridiculous. That is not learning how to read. And my answer for that would be not everyone's ready at the same time. Baloney. Give kids decodable text early on. And guess what? They don't stay in decodable text forever. It's a short window of time of when they need to learn how to transfer those skills that they're learning in phonics into text, and then they'll thrive and shine.
So mine is similar. And what I wrote down for myself was once kids can read, don't keep them in decodables. Get them.
Wait, so that's the same.
It's pretty much the same. I said, get them into decodables when they're learning how to read. Don't give them predictable text for learning how to read. Once they're in decodables, move them out into reading other things and let them stretch and start applying what they're learning. Next one, principle. What's the takeaway for a principal using this research?
All right, principals, here's the big one. I said it before and I'll say it again. I said it to the teachers, but I want principals to hear this loud and proud. Application is a priority. Make sure kids in your buildings are holding books. Make sure they're reading books. Make sure that small group instruction is happening. Make sure your tier 1 is happening. And when it is happening, make sure that kids are reading. Learning how to read is a process for kids. It doesn't just happen for some kids. Yes, there are some kids that just wake up and learn how to crack the code, but it's not the case for a lot of our kids. So show our kids how to read and make sure that application is prioritized.
So my takeaway for a principal would be, first of all, if you don't have decodables in your building, make sure they're ordered, because not every building has decodable books. Learn what a decodable is and the purpose of it. And this way you could observe teachers and know what you're looking at. Make sure that teachers have what they need, because if they don't have what they need, what are they going to choose? They're going to choose books that are inappropriate, or they're left to having to make up their own decodable stories. And, again, if you want to be able to have some influence in your building and some control of what's going on, you need to understand the difference between a decodable book and a leveled book, and stop asking teachers which level the child is in, because that kind of message.
All right, Faith, I have to interrupt. Takeaway Tuesday, takeaway Friday, whatever it is, you're getting a cheers. Can you say that again? Say it for the people in the back.
Stop asking teachers which level a child is on, because that type of question, that language will let teachers think that that's the important takeaway. And it's really about what kids are able to do and moving them along accordingly. So, next one is the parent. What's the takeaway for the parent here?
All right, so my takeaway for the parents know about the different types of texts that are available for kids to engage with. Know the purpose of decodables. What is a decodable? What can I do with a decodable? How do I teach a kid how to read with a decodable? Understand what a level text is, because if you're getting it and your kid can't read yet and can't decode a CBC word, and all of a sudden you're getting a level text like a level A, B, C, that's a red flag. And you should ask the teacher, why isn't my kid in a decodable? They're just learning how to read. But also other kind of books. If you're seeing your kid come home with a pattern book, I like Mom, I like Dad, I like Broccoli, I like Faith Borkowski.
I like Judy's answer because it was the same as mine.
That's weird. This is getting crazy. Maybe we were meant to be co-hosts.
That's it. It's showing that we're picking out some important points.
And if you see those pattern books, you don't want to see them. So ask the teacher, why are you sending my kid home with a powered pattern book? I really think that my kid would benefit from reading the decodable. But also parents know about read alouds and their purpose. They're very important too. And they're very important for knowledge building, oral language, storytelling. Read your kids stories. That's really that might not teach them to crack the code, but it will certainly help them understand and learn. And it's a big part of, the science of reading as well.
So I'm going to plug Teach My Kid to Read. So that's an organization. And I used to be on the board of Teach My Kid to Read. And they're all about educating people about the different types of books and getting decodable books into libraries and making sure they're used appropriately. So my takeaway was exactly the same as Judy's, and it made me think about Teach My Kid to Read. Okay, next one. And by the way, they're going to be at the World Literacy Summit too. Very exciting. Next one, research nugget, Judy.
Research nugget. There's no evidence to support leveled literacy and running records. those level A's, B's, C's, D's, throw them out. Now, you could repurpose the higher level books, because when kids can read, they should be able to enjoy anything. But there is no evidence to support leveled literacy. And the research is saying that the right approach is to focus on skills-based literacy. And that's why we have universal screeners now, which are much more aligned with the evidence and also see what skills kids are mastering or need support in.
So I agree 100%. My takeaway was that decodables are most important to be used in K-1. And that's what the research is saying. And we have mixed evidence about the value of decodables as kids get older, but we certainly know when they're learning how to read, it's they need that practice. They need the reinforcement. And of course, kids, your intervention kids, when they're at that very basic level, they certainly need to get that practice as well. All right, student outcome. What would you say about the research that could impact student outcomes?
All right, so I want to give credit to my friend Wiley Blevins for this one. He said that we need to make sure that we significantly increase the amount of time children are picking up books and picking up a pencil. Not only reading books, but also the writing portion is so important so that all the neurons in the brain integrate and we have successful lifelong readers and writers. So even during a phonics lesson, we want to see kids reading more during those phonics lessons. And also, don't skip dictation. We got to get those kids writing not only sounds, not only words, but also writing sentences.
So my takeaway would be to understand ORF, oral reading fluency, because if you understand and can interpret the results, then you'll know which books to recommend. You'll have the kids in the appropriate books at the appropriate time if you really dig in deeply to that ORF score. Hopefully, it's a benchmark and it's being used in all schools. And if not, that's a place to start. All right, next one, episode 64. Where is the evidence? Latest curriculum craze, part 1 with Nate Joseph and Stacy Bain. All right, great episode. This was a lot of fun. What's the teacher takeaway from this episode?
Wow, Faith is holding me accountable again. This feels like right now, it feels like it's double jeopardy. All right. Remember double jeopardy, Faith? All right, teacher takeaway. No BS. I think that pedagogy is key. I feel like my journey, and this was mine. I actually didn't know, Faith, could I pick something that I said, but I think it was a good one this time. I feel like my journey, because of so much training on the universal literacy team in New York City, made such a difference in my life. I think that training our teachers is key. So teachers, hopefully your administration, your district is giving you the training you deserve as you're on this learning journey. But if not, there's so many ways to learn about the science of reading and literacy. And one of the ways you could also learn is by watching the Literacy View, right? That's what we're doing here. So definitely pedagogy is key, because you may get one program and it came and it went, and some programs are better than others. But if you're armed with knowledge, nobody can take that away from you, and kids are going to benefit.
So my takeaway was that there is very little research on these big programs. And so what do we mean by a big program? That core curriculum. So as Nate said, there's very little research about that on those core knowledge-based curricula. Doesn't mean they don't have value. So I'm not saying something about the whole program. I'm sure there are parts that are evidence-based, and that's what seems to be the big takeaway there, that there are skills that we know that would need to be worked on, and there are strategies that are evidence-based. But when we put it all together, we have very little evidence that the whole program works. So what does this mean for a teacher? Know those evidence-based practices. If you know the practices, then you'll definitely know what to do for children. Thank you, honey. I see that cheers.
You never know. Sometimes a BS button could come out, but today.
Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
moving on. Principal, what do you say? You are muted.
All right, principals. I think principals have to have a clear vision for what tier 1 instruction looks like in every single classroom. They need to be able to support teachers and really help them develop their tier 1 instruction. What does that look like specifically? It's very easy to say, all right, you're implementing, CKLA or HMH, but what exactly does tier 1 instruction look like? How is my literacy block going to be structured? How much time am I spending on phonemic awareness? How much time am I spending on phonics? How much time and what does my ELA, English Language Arts reading lesson look like? How much time am I following the gradual release? And all those components. You have to be very clear. I think that it's important for administrators to be effective communicators because teachers really want guidance and clarity. And also they want to have a voice at that table with the principal. Don't just say this is what needs to happen. Have your teachers look at the data and principals look at the data, because sometimes you have to be responsive to your data when you're designing your literacy block. So don't just say this is what needs to happen. Look at the data and make decisions, but have teachers at that table with you.
So my takeaway for a principal would be, don't just blindly accept what a publishing rep is telling you. You really need to understand what is in that program, and do most of the boxes get checked for what you know should be taught in that classroom. And that means the principal has to be knowledgeable about the science of reading, unless you can't make those decisions. You don't want to give your power over to a publisher, a publishing rep. And the other piece I wanted to say is that coaching, what came out of this conversation is that coaching is so important. So rather than cut coaching, we need to really be increasing coaching hours, coaching time, and respect what that does in order to increase student outcomes. So next one.
Faith, can I just chime in? I'm with you on that one. And when we say coaches, I think it's something important. I speak about it with Faith, not just a coach that's coming in with a notepad and writing notes, a coach that's going to get down and dirty like Faith does every day in the field. And I try to do that too. On the spot feedback, co-teaching, side by side, modeling. So a real coach actually does the heavy lifting, just like the classroom teacher does.
And you get it, cheers, my dear. Because I should have been clear about that. Because, yeah, it's not just the title of coach, it's actually rolling up your sleeves, getting your hands dirty, and doing the modeling and conversations and really digging into what's happening, not just sitting there and being another, pseudo principal, evaluating. It's really about getting dirty, down and dirty, and doing the work. Good. So next one, the parent. What would you tell a parent about this conversation? A takeaway for the parent.
Parents, you need to start being informed. You need to ask the right questions. And Faith is a big advocate for that with her books and so forth. Ask questions. Do you know what program or curriculum your school is using? Do you know what are the key components of the literacy block, and are they doing phonemic awareness? Are they doing phonics? What program are they using? Are they, tracking your kids' data? Are they showing you data? Or are they just saying, oh, this is how your kid's doing, they're fine? No, ask questions. Don't be afraid. Are they using Lucy Corgan's teacher's reading and writing program that's not aligned to the science and evidence? Are they using, a program that has years of evidence? And what's going on in those classrooms? Don't be afraid to ask questions. You can't just think, oh, I live in this town and of course they're going to have the best of the best. Or, you can't assume. Ask questions.
Guess what? You and I, honey.
That's crazy, Faith.
And so the only thing I would add to that is check out the Reading League's curriculum navigator. So we did an episode on that, and it's not just for schools to use those documents. Parents actually could benefit from taking a look at that. So it gives them a clear indication of the types of questions they could ask. And thank you, Judy, for bringing up my books. Those books were written specifically for those types of conversations.
Say the names of the books, Faith. Be loud and proud. We never brag on this show. You're allowed to talk about your books for a second. I see one behind you.
So Failing Students or Failing Schools, A Parent's Guide to Reading Instruction and Intervention. And if only I would have known, that is going to come out this year, 2025, and it's going to be republished, and it's going to get a little bit of a facelift. So I will let everybody know when that happens. Thank you. So, okay, moving on. Students, what would you say could move students forward?
I think the key to moving students forward is that we look at student data very often, not once a month, not once a year, not only at benchmark time. We need to set small bite-sized goals for our students. We need to progress monitor how our students are doing, and we need to make sure that their outcomes are shifting. And when student outcomes are not shifting, that's when we need to reflect, what can we as educators do differently for that student so they do succeed? Because it's very easy to blame the parents. It's very easy to blame external factors. But I think the key to really, really influence student outcomes is to think, I have these kids for 7 hours a day. What can I do differently to make an impact and help a student to achieve?
So I'm going to go back to an episode we had with Maureen Ruby. Actually, Maureen was on a couple of episodes. I don't know the numbers offhand, but if you look up our episodes with Maureen Ruby, where she talks about how a program is not a curriculum. A program is not a curriculum. So what does that mean for a school? It means that if something doesn't make sense in this boxed program that's called the curriculum, it needs to be looked at. We need to revise. We need to sit down as a district and have conversations. Don't just let teachers follow along and teach it with fidelity, even if it's something that's wrong that should not be used. You need to really look after using it. Realize, don't keep doing the same thing again and again if it's not working. You need to sit down and really go through it.
Faith, that's the definition of insanity.
Exactly. So let's move on.
I don't think I did my research nugget. Can I quickly do my research nugget?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did we not talk about that? Sorry.
My quick research nugget, shout out again to Nate Joseph, was that very few curriculums have very strong research outcomes. He said, in fact, I can only think of one where I think they have decently large research evidence to support. And he actually went on to name CKLA, and I don't see it in any New York City public school, actually. So that's kind of interesting how the one program that showed the most evidence, I'm not seeing it in my neck of the woods. So a lot of these programs don't actually have that much evidence. So we have to monitor the situation and see what are the outcomes and see are studies coming out.
Well,
And
I think, you know, when it's left to principals and they're given a choice of 3 programs, that's what they're going to choose. You know, that in all fairness to the principals, at least in New York City, that's what happened. So,
who was at the table when these decision make, it makes you think. Things that make you go,
yes, I would agree. I would agree. So mine is very similar to yours. You're right. I skipped the research nugget for that one because it kind of was mentioned before, but it's what I said that really these big box programs don't have a lot of research behind it. And so we really have to look at the ones that have uh, more evidence behind it, and those would be the ones with specific skills that you're focused on, more than these big programs. Hopefully one day there will be some more evidence, but right now, from what we're seeing, there's very little evidence on big programs. So don't put all your eggs in one basket with a program thinking that your work is done. Okay, moving on. Next one, episode 70, and that is the most effective reading instruction with Molly Ness. And guess what? Molly is going to be at the World Literacy Summit. So we are going to have so much fun. And I forgot to mention when I mentioned the Reading League's curriculum navigator, so is Maria Murray and Carrie Curto. So we're going to have a blast. So hopefully people will be joining us at the World Literacy Summit in the UK. All right. So Molly Ness, she was talking about a shaky language foundation. So what's your nugget for a teacher? What is the teacher takeaway here?
All right, so Molly made it a key point to understand that read alouds are not a luxury. They're not a waste of instructional time. Do you hear that? Read alouds are important and they're being neglected in a lot of classrooms, and it really is freaking me out. And she said, well, when I get questions like, well, does the science of reading carve out space for read alouds? Yes, it does. Read alouds are key for knowledge building, for comprehension, for oral language, for so many things. So please make sure that teachers, you are making sure that there are read alouds in your classroom and that you are reading aloud to students and having those great, rich discussions and not just showing them nonfiction text, but also fiction text as well.
So, of course, I had the same one, but I'm going to add to that and say that not only should read alouds be a non negotiable, but it also should be planned with intention. So it's not just pulling a book off a shelf and saying, I'm going to read aloud. No, you really need to look at your book, read it before you read it to kids so you know the types of conversations you want to have. Know what you want to do with your read aloud. Okay, principal. What's the nugget for the principal?
Nugget for the principal: carve out intentional time for read alouds. Don't just try to squeeze it in at the end of the day if there's time, or say we're going to do read alouds once a week. And if your curriculum doesn't have rich read alouds, make sure that they still happen. Just because you bought a box program and it doesn't say read this great story like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, doesn't mean it shouldn't be happening. It's crazy. We had Kathy Rassel on from, I think, the UK that showed us that there was a strong evidence and research-based support saying that read alouds are critical. In fact, there's some evidence out there that says you don't even need to have a box program, but if you have a wonderful, rich body of read alouds and work on the skills and standards based on that, you can have highly successful outcomes. So that's my nugget for schools. And also we can have read alouds in middle school grades as well.
Big cheers, honey.
Oh wow. It's my lucky night. It's like I won the lotto. I can't wait till our viewers are involved in our trivia game based on these 5 episodes. We're going to hold them accountable, and maybe there'll be some prizes in store. Who knows what could happen on the Literacy View? This is edutainment at its finest.
Anything can happen. So my takeaway was very similar to yours. And I said, oh, could you just knock off your sound, Judy? Thanks. Anyhow, my takeaway for principals was that they need to protect read aloud time, that it needs to be carved in, just like anything else, into the literacy block. So your job really is to make sure it is protected and that it's being used appropriately. Yeah, I really, everything you said was just perfect. I can't add any more to that. Next one, parents. What would you say to parents?
Parents, it's important to have your kids read decodables when they're learning how to read, but it's also critically important to read aloud to your kids. Read them a bedtime story. My own kid, he's 22, but he says one of the most impactful parts of his early childhood days was when I used to read to them at night, both my boys. It made a big difference, and now they love to read and enjoy it. And I think that their comprehension is definitely strong because of all those read alouds that we did at home, all those discussions that we had. I think it helps with oral language and so forth. And I just wanted to give one example. So I work with many kids and parents in my private practice. And, you know, a lot of parents are telling me that kids are even struggling with writing fiction, that schools are spending so much time writing nonfiction, procedural writing, persuasive writing. And I think we've lost the art of learning how to write fictional pieces, like writing a story. So I think it's really important that we still read those kids those stories and have those kids write about those stories as well and create imaginative stories as well.
So, yeah, so the text structure of giving kids the rhythm of, you know, we called it story grammar. That, I don't know, I haven't heard that term of art in a long time. But when I went to school, it was called story grammar. So maybe there are some older teachers out there and know what I'm talking about. But it's very, very important that they understand the setting, the characters, you know, the plot, the solution, the climax of a story. In any case, I think that what you're saying for parents is accurate, that they need to do the read alouds and to read aloud to your kid beyond what you think is the time to stop. Like, I know I read aloud and my husband read aloud to our kids till they were like almost teenagers, really. We really did. It was our time to be together. And I could tell you that they loved that. It was just conversations about books and we just talked about stories and talking. Put the phones down and talk. Have those dinner conversations. It's so important to talk and to get kids talking. There should be this back and forth conversation. In Harvard, they call it serve and return. So you're, you know, dishing out something and they're responding, and then you're taking their response and adding on to that. We call that dialogic reading, and that is mentioned in my If Only I Would Have Known book. So that's an important point for parents. Next one, the research nugget. What would you say?
Okay, so when schools are making curriculum program decisions, you have to make sure that read alouds are a cornerstone of the instruction in the classroom. Whatever program you're adopting, I don't care if it's CKLA, HMH, Wit and Wisdom, make sure that those read alouds are happening. The research supports that that's a key part of a structured literacy block. And there's a lot of research to support that.
And mine is what I saw from the research is language is just as essential as foundational skills. And that I think is really important that we have that rope, that reading rope. And yeah, it's easier to teach finite skills. So, the decoding part is definitely easier because you could check off skills, where the language part is a little bit more vague in terms of what to do and how to build that, but it is equally important. So, what do we do with this research for student outcomes?
If you want to maximize student outcomes, guess what? Teaching the code and teaching meaning, comprehension is critical, as well as what Faith just said, that oral language piece, that is those are all vital components of your literacy block: the vocabulary, comprehension, learning how to decode, learning how to speak. If you want lifelong readers, make sure you don't neglect any critical pillar, and fluency as well.
And I would say if we're going to increase student outcomes, we really need to dig into that language domain. And that means understanding what DLD is, right? Developmental language disability. And we need to understand what to do with it and recognize it, because there are kids sitting there and it's not being recognized. And that's an important part of coaching and training teachers to be able to know what to do with language. And we need to start assessing that other part of the rope.
Faith, I think that was so important because it's true. Like, there's so much attention to dyslexia, but there are other issues that kids can have as they're learning how to read. There's auditory processing issues. There's all type of issues. There's kids that have trouble with comprehension. So yes, you are so right, Faith.
And, I think that it's easier to have these conversations about something that's tangible, right? Oh, my kids don't know this skill. Where with language, it's really hard to pinpoint some of this. That's why language assessments I think, are going to take off in 2025, 2026. That's something I think is going to be on the horizon. Next one, let's talk about, and this is our last episode 56, Reading Fluency and the Science of Reading with Dr. Tim Rosinski. What is your takeaway for a teacher?
You are so funny, Faith. You don't even give me a second to breathe.
Gotta keep moving.
Wow, this is really a game show. Let me spin the wheel. Wheel of Fortune. No, that was, what show was that? The Price is Right? Yeah, The Price is Right. All right. Teacher takeaway for the episode with our friend Tim Rosinski. All right. That's where you have to be an artist. And that's why he said that being a teacher, you need to be an artist and a scientist. You can't be one or the other. And fluency is such a key component of becoming a good reader. And it is often the neglected pillar of literacy instruction. teaching kids not only to read quickly, because a lot of people think, oh, fluency is, the oral reading fluency. How many words can I read in a minute? No, there's so much more to fluency. What do I sound like? Am I sounding phrased and fluent? Am I able to read in phrases? Do I understand what I'm reading? And I think that fluency is such an important pillar. It's basically the bridge between decoding and comprehension. So, in order to be a successful reader, teachers make sure that fluency is prioritized. What do I do when I see a period? Kids don't just know. What do I do when I see quotation marks? What does that mean? Who's talking? What do I do when I see a question mark?
So I love this quote from that episode. Phonics takes up all the oxygen in the room. Now, if you were to ask me that years ago, I would say it didn't even exist. But now, like it happens, we go from one extreme to the other. And I think that we have to be very careful, certainly as teachers, not to let that really take up all the oxygen in the room. Fluency needs to be prioritized, as you said, Judy. And one of the things that Tim Rosinski is a master at is this rehearsal, using a performance as a way to get kids to do repeated readings when it could be a little boring to do that. So rehearsal practice is practice. And then there's something fun at the end by performing something. So don't forget about Reader's Theater as one way to get fluency done. All right, next one. Tip for the principal. What would you say?
All right, so principals. A lot of schools are thinking how to budget their literacy block time. It is important to make sure that you allocate time for a shared reading experience. A shared reading experience is where kids get to practice fluency, where they're practicing maybe with a lot of support. Maybe they're using echo reading, where the teacher is saying a phrase or a sentence, and now the kids are saying it. And maybe the kids are ready for more of a choral reading experience where they're familiar with the text. It's something that they have been working on for a while, and they could have, a choral reading experience. So make sure that we have time for kids to practice their phrasing and fluency. It's a really important skill. It doesn't just happen. A lot of students sound like robots when they're reading, and a lot of principals, I think teachers might know that more than the principals, but principals, you know what? Start listening to kids read in your building and see what they sound like. And if they're sounding like robots, that might be a red flag where you might say, are we allocating enough time where we're doing shared reading? But, it's not just about doing shared reading. It's about what are we doing during that shared reading experience? Are we just working on decoding skills? Are we just working on comprehension? Or are we making sure that we're also targeting fluency and what that means?
Guess what?
Come on, stop it.
I have to tell you.
The viewers are all going to think it's rigged, that we planned this in advance. Faith, this is really strange.
Well, I'm telling you, I have it right here. Same thing. And I said, teachers need to know that fluency is important, what it looks like. And as a principal, you need to make sure they're allocating enough time for working with that and to know which kids need that fluency work. So very similar to what you said. All right. Research. What's your research nugget here? Oh, I think I forgot parent. Sorry. What would you say is a parent takeaway for this?
Yes. Parents, you could work on phrasing and fluency with your kids. It's a great activity to do with your kids. So when you're reading a decodable with them, you could model. You could read a sentence, then your child could echo after you. Or if it's a book that your child's been practicing for a while, you guys can have a choral reading experience together where you guys can read, you know, a page of the book together. But also, parents, model what you sound like as a great reader. You've broken the code, so it's really easy for you to model what it sounds like to be phrased and fluent. And that's a really rich experience for your child to hear that and practice with you. And also, parents, when you're doing your read alouds, don't just read like a robot. Make sure you're expressive. Make sure like it's the most exciting thing when you're reading it, so that kids get to hear what it sounds like to be phrased and fluent.
So I'm going to just say one thing about that. I think that's great advice for parents who can read. And, you know, I don't think we can assume that all parents are strong readers, because they're not. So one way to start building fluency is to put on an audiobook. So at least provide that. If you're not a confident reader yourself, then, you know, audiobooks are great, and have the discussions with them. So listen along with your child and have the discussions, and see if they could also perhaps pick up the book and start trying to follow along. I remember when I was a kid, we used to have books with a record, right? And we used to listen for the little ding and turn the page and read along with the record. So those things don't go out of style. Those are a great, great ways to build fluency. What's the research nugget here, Judy?
The research nugget. Hold on. Uh-oh. I lost my place. 1 second. I was
Do you
on my
want me
chair.
to jump in while you're looking? Do you want me to do mine while you're looking, or do you have it?
You could, well, no, I found it. My research nugget. Okay, even though there are other ways to work on fluency, Nate Joseph actually showed in a study that with the that fluency instruction is a really key component of teaching kids how to read, and the research supports that. There was a bar graph that showed that that was the most effective.
So I had using difficult, oh, knock off the sound, Judy. I'm sorry.
Faith, do you remember that bar graph mention that Nate mentioned in that episode, in the article?
No, I'm just going to share something else. I wanted to say that don't be afraid of difficult books. And what the research shows is using difficult text for fluency actually increases gains, that we should not just use very easy books for fluency, that we should be using more challenging books. And Tim Shanahan talks about this as well. So there is definitely a lot of research about using something that's difficult, not only easy, for fluency work. That was my takeaway.
And that's an interesting one. And I think that Tim Rosinski actually spoke about that on the episode as well. I think, though, that, you know, when kids are working on fluency, sometimes, though, if we give them something that's too complex, it could be difficult. So it's almost like what Tim Rosinski said. Sometimes it's a balancing act to see, you know, is the kid struggling too much, that they're really like the brain is working too hard, or is it going really well? Because sometimes you can accelerate kids and give them something that's more challenging. But I think even in that episode, if I recall correctly, Faith, you mentioned that, you know, showing some kids that are just working on CVC words, something that's too difficult might actually be counterproductive. So I think
that's what Nate said also, and I agree.
I think that was part of what I missed
Right.
when I was speaking.
So for the beginning reader, right, where they're just starting out, no, this is what I just said is not for them. We're talking about a kid who has a good amount of phonics under their belts, and that they're able to then take this to the next level. And by doing that, you could use more challenging books. So I'm glad you mentioned that, Judy, because I don't think I made that clear. But we did separate out kids, and we said, yeah, but those kids in intervention or kids who are really at the beginning of their reading journey, no, we're not going to throw them into something challenging. But there are kids, and that's why we have to know the kids and know what to do with them. All right, how do we use this research for student outcomes?
For students' outcomes, okay. So fluency is really, really important, and a really good place, like Faith mentioned earlier on, is to monitor kids and what's going on during their oral reading fluency. So that's oral reading fluency is what we use in screeners, and they're very different than a running record, but in some ways they look a little bit the same because you're listening to kids read. But I think the key difference is not looking at all those, does it make sense? Does it sound right? Does it look right? And all those pieces, but really looking at from a skills-based lens on, okay, what are the kids struggling with in terms of decoding? And it doesn't hurt. You, of course, you're going to see, did they understand what they read, and so forth. But you're really going to go in with a lens, not just saying, oh, they turned up red on the screen, or they're struggling, or they turned blue on the thing, they're doing great, and they could read grade level text. Because it's a little bit scary. I see what's happening in schools. People aren't really looking at those screeners carefully enough. They're not looking at where kids slipped up.
Guess what?
Stop. People are going to get annoyed.
I have it right here. ORF score. What's holding the kid back? What are the underlying skill deficits? Know how to interpret an ORF. Exactly what you just said. So I can't add any more to that. And I just want you to know we did 5 episodes in a little over 1 hour. Woo! All right.
That was amazing. So everybody, thank you for joining us. The trivia game is coming. It's on the horizon. All the details will be forthcoming. And follow us on Facebook. Join the Literacy View group, and also visit our website, theliteracyview.com. And we have ad opportunities, sponsorship opportunities, and lots of good things on the horizon. Happy New Year, everyone. Till next time.
And just one more thing. The same way we did Takeaway Tuesdays and modeled how we really wanted to pull out the most important points, don't depend on us. You do this. You dive into those episodes. Go back, do what we did. Use this as a learning opportunity, because not only are podcasts for enjoyment, and maybe you're listening while you're doing your cleaning or driving, but if you really go back and listen and try to take notes, you're going to see that there's a lot that you'll remember if you are intentional about being an active learner. So we'll leave it at that. Can't wait to see you January 30th for our trivia game. But there are other things coming up, a lot of things coming up before January 30th. Look for an episode on morphology. That's going to be coming up. The baseball study that some of you start pointing to, what is it and what does it mean for you? All right, that's coming up. We'll talk to you soon. Bye now.